So earlier this year, I produced, directed, and DP'd my first short film, and I just wanted to come on and highlight some of the more notable mistakes that I feel I made in the process, stepping into the narrative world for the first time, coming from a more commercial and corporate filmmaking background. I'm not too sure if it's fair to label this first one as a mistake, as there's always going to be those projects where you need to have your hands on every aspect of the production due to budget constraints. But this was definitely one of those projects. I co-wrote the script with Justin. I also produced this project, which means I was responsible for managing the budget, casting the talent, creating the schedule, hiring and managing the crew, among many of other things. And yes, doing all of that was a lot, but it was relatively manageable as we were able to move at our own pace in pre-production due to no real time constraints or deadlines, as this was largely a passion project. So the most difficult part about wearing multiple hats wasn't necessarily in pre-production, but more so in the actual production itself, as I was not only directing, but also DPing this short film. Most of the projects that I've directed and DP'd in the past have more so been montage style, commercial or corporate jobs, which in my opinion are far less demanding from a directing standpoint. When directing those projects, your focus is solely on the physical performance of the on-screen talent, which I'm kind of paying attention to and doing anyways as the cinematographer. But when it's a narrative project, you're now introducing dialogue, which you not only have to direct the delivery of, but you also need to make sure the lines that are being delivered are staying on script and you are getting what you want and they are consistent with previous takes and different angles, so it all cuts together nice. So doing all that from a directing perspective while also trying to DP the project and operate the camera, make sure the composition's nice, make sure the lighting's on point, making sure the camera movement is what you are looking for, and all of these things, that is when balancing both of those roles, in my opinion, from my experience, gets really difficult. And that is something that I overlooked until I actually got my hands dirty and directed and DP'd my first short film. For me, as a cinematographer, it was the directing role that kind of took a back seat when I was tight on time, or my focus just naturally was on making the best looking image possible, whether that be with lighting, composition, camera movement, and maybe overlooking the directing role and not giving that side of things the attention that it deserves in a situation like this. So what I could have done if budget was not a concern is I could have brought on a camera operator, which would have at least allowed me as the director and DP to take my hands off the camera and kind of free up some of that space for me to put towards the directing role. So another mistake that I feel I made was overestimating our capabilities as a lean crew. I've learned that it's best to keep productions like this as simple as they can be and minimize the amount of setups and locations that you are shooting at, which is something that I feel I could have done a better job at on this production. Especially with this one particular scene that didn't even end up making it into the final film, so we just wasted an hour or two of one of the production days, which put us behind schedule a bit. For some reason, I wrote this scene into the script where it was this grandma at her dining table at night playing poker with these two guys in suits, which, if you've seen the film, doesn't really make any sense at all. I just thought it would kind of be funny and I went for it. I thought we were gonna be able to pull it off. What was difficult about this is that I wrote it as a night scene to differentiate it from the dining scene, which was in the same location, in the same room. And so I just wanted to separate the two of those, and it was like, okay, the dining scene is more late afternoon when it's still light out, and this poker scene will be during the nighttime. It will be dark. The problem with that is that we had this location rented from like 7 a.m. to 12 p.m. So obviously we would have to do this day for night, which when you're running with the tiny crew that we had, takes a lot of time and oftentimes won't work out great because you don't have the proper resources to do so. And this was definitely an example of that. This meant we were gonna have to black out all of the windows in frame, which is very difficult when you have the small crew that we had. So what we did was just throw a couple black solids on C-stands and raise them up as high as we could to block as much of the window as we could and bring them as close to the window as possible to cut all of that light and have the windows appear as if it was nighttime out. This was very challenging because we filmed this in a bit of a snowstorm, so the conditions outside were pretty rough. It was pretty windy and snowy out, if I'm remembering correctly. And so those black solids, we didn't have like a ton of clamps or anything like that to clamp them to on the actual house. So they're just kind of blowing everywhere in the wind. Hard to bring the C-stands as close to the house as possible due to the snow that's piling up on the side of the house, and just all in all, not the best conditions for a very lean crew to be doing something like this, nor did we have the time to do so, and this really did set us back on our day. On top of this, I made the mistake of not taking the proper measurements of the window during the scout, and the C-stands at full stick weren't even able to reach the top of the windows from outside, so there was a foot or two at the top of the window just open, letting light in, and we had to frame that out of a couple shots, which was just another thing to add on top of the mess of a scene that was to try and shoot. All things considered, the majority of the shots from the scene actually turned out pretty solid, and I do think it was a decent attempt at a very budget day for night scene, and I honestly would have included it in the final video if it made sense in the context of the story, but as I got to editing, I quickly realized that that scene did not have a place in this short film. Looking back, I was definitely a bit too ambitious with the setup required for a scene like this. Just another learning experience. If you don't have much crew, try and simplify things as much as possible. And on that note, when you are shooting at multiple locations and have multiple setups per location, it is crucial to have a first AD on the project, which, if you could guess, we did not. There were plenty of points where we fell behind schedule on this production, which resulted in us needing to rush a few setups and ultimately not getting the take that we wanted, but needing to move on so we can capture everything needed for the edit. If we had a first AD to keep us on schedule, I'm sure we could have avoided plenty of the mistakes that were made that resulted in us falling behind schedule. So this was another major takeaway from this production. But anyway, that was 3 mistakes and learning lessons that I took away from making my first short film. I hope you were able to take something away from this, and if you're interested in watching the full short film, I'll leave a link in the description below so you could go check it out. I'm also planning on making a full breakdown of this short film, so if you have any questions regarding this production, feel free to leave them in the comments below or shoot me a DM on Instagram.